The Time America Almost Had a King, the story of George Washington's toughest choice. The American Revolutionary War, a conflict ostensibly waged to sever the chains of monarchy and establish a republic rooted in popular sovereignty, was nearing its conclusion in the early 1780s. Yet in the crucible of this nascent nation's struggle for existence, a paradox emerged, presenting the very man who embodied the revolution's ideals with the profound and challenging choice that would define the American experiment. George Washington's toughest choice, the rejection of an overture for him to become a king or a figure of similar monarchical power. This pivotal moment, often obscured by the grandeur of military victories and constitutional debates, represents the essential, fragile triumph of republicanism over deep-seated historical precedent and human ambition. The context of crisis, the Continental Army's discontent. By 1782, following the decisive victory at Yorktown, the Continental Army remained encamped at Newburgh, New York, awaiting the formal conclusion of the peace treaty. Despite their success on the battlefield, the troops, officers, and enlisted men alike faced devastating uncertainty. The Confederation Congress, operating under the weak Articles of Confederation, possessed neither the political will nor the financial means to fulfill its promises to the soldiers. Years of back pay were owed, and the crucial promise of pensions for officers, the half-pay for life resolution passed in 1780, remained unsecured. This chronic financial negligence fostered a deep and legitimate grievance within the military ranks. The officers, having sacrificed their livelihoods and years of their lives, watched their families struggle while the civilian government seemed indifferent. This disillusionment was further fueled by a perception of civilian incompetence and ingratitude. Many in the officer corps felt that the Republican experiment was fundamentally flawed, too weak, too fractured, and too susceptible to local factionalism to secure the nation's integrity and fulfill its obligations. They observed the Continental Army, the one truly unified national institution, and concluded that only a stronger, more centralized, and perhaps even authoritarian form of government, led by a proven, decisive leader, could guarantee order and stability. The subtle approach, Colonel Lewis Nicola's letter. The tension reached a head in May 1782. A correspondent, Colonel Lewis Nicola, a respected but perhaps overly zealous officer, wrote a lengthy, detailed letter to General Washington. Nicola's letter, seemingly innocuous in its initial framing as a discussion on the Army's organization and future, quickly moved to a radical proposal. He began by articulating the widespread dissatisfaction and the fear among the officers that the current structure of government could never properly compensate them or secure the nation. He bemoaned the shabbiness of the Republic, a government based on Republican form, which he believed was inherently unstable and ungrateful. Nicola then proposed a definitive, drastic solution: the establishment of a monarchy or a similar hereditary supreme magistracy with Washington at its head. He argued that the British model, with an established sovereign, provided the necessary stability, respect, and authority that the fledgling American government lacked. Nicola suggested that Washington's unparalleled authority, integrity, and command over the hearts of the people made him the ideal, indeed the only candidate to become the American king. He even subtly hinted at the notion of Washington adopting the title of a king, or perhaps a uniquely American equivalent. The core of the letter was a direct appeal to Washington's ambition, framed as a duty to save the nation from its own flawed political design. Washington's immediate and categorical rejection. Washington's response to Nicola's letter was not just a rejection, it was a defining moment of moral and political rectitude. His reply, penned on May 20, 1782, was swift, decisive, and uncompromising. He did not engage in a detailed debate on the merits of monarchy versus republicanism. Instead, he expressed immediate and profound shock, even anger. Washington stated unequivocally that he read Nicola's proposal with astonishment and displeasure. He declared the suggestion of him becoming a king or taking on any monarchical title as in the most unpleasing point of view. Furthermore, he accused Nicola of making a suggestion that was big with the greatest mischiefs that can befall your country. Washington understood the profound danger in such an idea. It would have fundamentally betrayed every principle for which the war had been fought and every drop of blood that had been spilled. It would have transformed the noble cause of liberty into a mere change of masters. In his forceful rebuttal, Washington underscored his commitment to Republican ideals. He affirmed that his greatest aspiration was to contribute to the establishment of a government founded on the principles of liberty and justice, not on inherited or assumed power. He concluded his letter with a stern warning, insisting that Nicola never again communicate such an idea to him or anyone else, as it had the potential to give the army an unfavorable impression of my principles. The significance of the refusal. A precedent for civilian rule. Washington's categorical refusal to entertain the idea of monarchy was a monumental act of political self-abnegation. This decision transcended a simple personal preference. It established a vital precedent for the supremacy of civilian government and the subordination of the military, a foundational tenet of the American Republic. By rejecting the crown, Washington did several crucial things. Affirmed republicanism. He provided immediate and tangible proof that the principles of the revolution were genuine, and that its leader was not fighting merely for personal gain or power. He demonstrated that the ideal of a republic was not just an abstract concept, but a practical, achievable political reality. Secured his moral authority. His rejection solidified his moral and political authority, not as a strongman, but as a servant of the people. This authority would prove indispensable in managing the subsequent, even more dangerous Newburgh conspiracy in March 1783. Insulated the army, he protected the Continental Army from the charge of sedition and ensured its honor remained tied to the cause of liberty, preventing a disastrous rift with the civilian government. The incident with Colonel Nicola was a precursor to the Newburgh crisis, where Washington would once again be tested. In Newburgh, a group of officers, encouraged by an anonymous address, considered taking radical action, potentially marching on Congress, to force a redress of their grievances. In that dramatic confrontation, Washington appealed directly to the officers' patriotism and their commitment to the ideals of the Revolution, famously using his failing eyesight to disarm the conspirators. He reminded them that the only way to honor their sacrifices was to preserve the integrity of the Republican government they had created. The long-term impact, the civic virtue of Cincinnatus. Washington's choice echoes the classical Roman ideal of Cincinnatus, the farmer-turned-dictator who, having saved Rome from invasion, immediately relinquished his absolute power and returned to his plow. Washington's refusal of the crown, his eventual peaceful resignation as commander-in-chief in 1783, and his later decision to step down after 2 terms as president, were all deliberate, conscious acts of Cincinnatus civic virtue. This pattern of voluntary relinquishment of power provided the necessary moral infrastructure for the young republic. It taught future American leaders that ultimate authority resided not in the person of the ruler, but in the constitutional framework of the government. This set the United States on a distinct path, one where military force was subservient to civilian rule, and where the highest office was a temporary stewardship, not an inherited right. In conclusion, the time America almost had a king is not a tale of a near-miss catastrophe, but a story of deliberate, principled choice. George Washington's immediate and uncompromising rejection of the monarchy offered by Colonel Nicola in 1782 was more than a personal decision. It was the essential affirmation of the American Revolution's core mission. It secured the fragile Republican experiment, cemented the foundational role of civic virtue in American leadership, and established the enduring precedent that the chief executive would be a president, not a king. This choice, made in the face of widespread instability and disillusionment, stands as a supreme example of political integrity and a testament to the fact that the most powerful force in a republic is not the sword, but the principle.